founder and CEO of Predictive ROI, and I'm delighted that you could join us for this private web workshop. But before I turn it over to Don Yaeger, I just want to check with my operator, make sure that the audio is good. Looks like we are. And Don, can you give us a mic check also?
Mic check, Don.
Okay, looks like we're green light and go. So everything is working properly. So ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for being here. And I will now turn the session over to my good friend, mentor, and 7-time New York Times bestselling author, Don Yaeger.
Stephen, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks all of you for joining us tonight. It's exciting. It's the first time I've had the chance to do a webinar like this, so I am grateful that you'd spend your time, your part of your evening with us, and I look forward to having the chance to communicate with a number of you, even more so in the future. But I wanted to take a few minutes as I was working with Stephen on the program here, and just going to share a little bit with you. As many of you know, I have a relationship with Success Magazine, and Stephen's got the slide up there of the most recent story I did for them on the coach of the Indianapolis Colts, Chuck Pagano. Really amazing man, an unbelievable story. And fortunately, for the last several years since I retired from Sports Illustrated, I have had the opportunity to, for Success, deliver a story every couple of months about an athlete or a coach or somebody in the world of sports whose life is inspirational enough that they deserve to be on those pages of Success. And through that relationship with Success, I also developed a relationship with Darren Hardy, the publisher of Success Magazine. And Darren actually does an event called the High Performance Forum. And last year, I attended that event, and while there, learning from Darren, it's this Darren's environment there that he creates is a forum of just 24 CEOs of companies, all of whom are working to try to grow what they do, and one of the 23 other CEOs that was there was Stephen Woessner, who I'm honored to be joining on this call tonight. But Stephen and I actually became accountability partners. At the end of Darren's event, he actually pairs up everybody with someone else who will then will hold them accountable. Will be that person that gets a chance on a weekly basis to make you stick to those things you committed to yourself that you were going to do. And it's a unique environment for me, something I'd never done before. I mean, here I was, reasonably successful as an entrepreneur, out on my own business, but I didn't have anybody who was truthfully holding me accountable until I entered into this relationship. And Stephen Woessner became my partner. And so every Friday for the last year, every Friday morning, Stephen and I get up and we hold ourselves accountable. We go through the wins, the losses, and the aha moments from the previous week, and things that we can get and grow and get better. But as part of that process, Stephen actually came to Tallahassee. He actually came down to Tallahassee, where I live, and he spent 5 days with my team and I, looking at our process, what we do, and how we are digitally represented on the internet, how others see us, and what our marketing and our business plan was, and how it was being affected by the way we were reaching and touching people through the web. And then as our relationship continued to grow, Stephen even invited me to join him in an event that he's hosting in January called Predictive ROI Live. It's going to be in Orlando, and Darren Hardy will also be a speaker. And the lineup is pretty incredible, actually. I'm kind of I'm awed to be in the list and on the team, but my team and I will be there for the full 2.5 days. We're going to be there to do everything, and I'm going to participate in not just delivering the closing keynote, which I'll be honored to do, but also some of the VIP Q&A sessions and the other things. And as I said, I'll be the final speaker on their Saturday morning. But so as we were preparing for this, as we were kind of going through how that is going to work in January, there was also the discussion about how what Stephen has taught me, and my desire to actually share some of that with those of you who I've had the chance to work with, and those of you who I've grown to know over the years as a speaker. And so I did an interview with Stephen. I think some of you might have seen it. It was a video that we posted a couple of different times on the website, but an interview in which I asked him to kind of go a little bit deeper and talk about this discussion of how your presence, how you tell your story on the internet impacts the way that people see and do business with you. Because I will tell you, as I watched the way Stephen made tweaks to our video presence, our presence on the internet, the more I saw how that web marketing, digital marketing, has great impact. It has changed the way we show up, and for that I was grateful, but I also wanted then to share some of that with some of you. So we've lined this webinar up, and the way it's going to go is really quickly. Stephen's going to share a little bit about what he does and how this process works, and some of the things that he's got that are lessons that you can take out of this short time period. That hopefully, if you're running a business or you hope to run a business, these are things I hope you'll take and be able to learn something from. And then I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about the power of storytelling. Ironically, Steve and I were talking before we got on the line here. I'm actually in Jacksonville, Florida tonight, and I've spent today, and I'll spend the next 2 days with the Wounded Warriors Project in Jacksonville. Many of you probably know of the charity, the Wounded Warriors Project, and they actually have a little speakers bureau, and they're trying to get their wounded warriors out in front of audiences, and they asked me to spend these 3 days working with these warriors, incredible people, let me tell you, every one of them, on how to better tell their story. So much of what I'm going to talk to you about tonight and on this power of storytelling will be some of the lessons that I've shared over these last couple of days, or will share over these next couple of days. And then Stephen is going to, and then after I get done talking a little bit about storytelling, Stephen's going to come back and share some of the ways that some of all of this might prove to be of value to you. So, and then we're going to take some questions at the end, and through the chat portion of this WebEx, and hopefully there will be the opportunity for some of you to engage, ask a question. If you've got one about storytelling, I'd be glad to answer it. If it's more about the digital marketing side, Stephen will be here to do it as well. So with that, Stephen, I'd like to turn it over to you and have you share some of what you've got to offer here.
Thanks, Don. I appreciate that very much. Awesome introduction. And so I'm going to start off this first section with a rhetorical question. And what would you do if you noticed somebody on your sales team or your customer service staff absolutely ignoring 20 to 30% of the customers and prospects that called your office or physically stopped in to see you? And let's take it even further. So not only ignoring them, but showing zero concern or empathy at all to the customer situation or their challenges. In fact, they never even bothered to ask the customers any questions so they could understand or even try to solve their problems. And ultimately, your staff simply dismissed the customers or prospects and never even cared if they went off and gave your competitors their valuable business. What would you do? How long would you let that go on before you replace that staff with people who delivered on your expectations? Well, unfortunately, that's exactly what most business owners are letting happen every single day. Unknowingly, all day, every day, inside your business, whether you run a financial services company or a capital equipment manufacturer or some sort of professional services firm or maybe a retail organization, maybe even a nonprofit, no matter what your industry is. But how is this happening? Who is alienating your precious customers and prospects, those people who are coming to visit you every day? Well, I will tell you that the culprit is subtle and it's silent, and it's your website. In fact, I'll extend it even further by saying it's your entire digital existence of your business. So since the advent of the commercial internet, I've collected tens of thousands of data points that have given me the ability to identify what I call the 8 money-draining mistakes And those are the mistakes that are preventing you from building an audience, from effectively telling the story that Don just mentioned, from attracting more visitors to your website, using your story to convert those visitors into more leads, and helping you reach your sales goals. So in the next several minutes, I'm going to show you how to identify one of the most expensive money-draining mistakes, but then most importantly, how to fix it. And that money-draining mistake, actually in the series of 8, is number 3, and it's called high bounce rate. So first, let me give you a quick definition of what bounce rate is. So let's say that somebody comes to your website, whether it's your home page, maybe a blog article that you just wrote, maybe it's a product page or a service page or any sort of page that's within your website. It doesn't matter how they found it. If they did a Google search or they came there through social media, an email campaign, doesn't matter, but they came to a page within your website. They looked at it. For whatever reason, they hated it, they puked in a bucket, and they immediately left without making one single click within your website. That is defined as bounce rate. And I will tell you, it is a very widespread problem. So this screenshot that you're seeing right now is showing in the lower right-hand corner 77% bounce rate. So let me say that another way. 77% of all of the visitors to this website immediately left without making one single click on any of the content pages that they were seeing, like in the navigation, all the different links and so forth around the content that they were looking at. 77% of the people read what they came to read, puked, hated it, and immediately left without making one single click. So think about that from a business owner perspective. You spend all that time, effort, and money to bring these people to your site, whether that's through advertising or public relations or crafting this awesome story that Don is going to teach us in section 2 tonight, and being able to masterfully do it. And then you put all of that energy forward, and 77% of the people who come to that site immediately leave. It's insane, but we need to fix that. But what is the right goal that we should have in place? What should we really strive for? And 30% is really the goal. So the typical website has between 50 and 60% bounce rate, staggering. So you can test that theory by going to Google Analytics, opening up your dashboard, and see for yourself what your aggregate bounce rate is. And my guess is, unless you've put specific practices into place to lower your bounce rate, it's probably between 50 and 60%. But 30% ought to be your goal. But where does 30% goal come from? And it came from my friend and mentor, Avinash Kaushik. He's the digital marketing evangelist for Google and co-founder of a company called Market Motive. Now, I will say there's a great interview. I was actually at Google several weeks ago, and I sat down and did a video with Avinash, much in the same way that I did a video with Don. And so that's out on YouTube. You can go to YouTube and you can find it. It's about 32 minutes of awesomeness. And Avinash does an incredibly good job of explaining why bounce rate is so important, but also many other vital metrics and how to take advantage of those. It is great training and education, totally free. You can find it out on YouTube. But that's where the 30% bounce rate comes from, or that goal. So next, typically when we share this type of story with business owners and executives, it's very easy to kind of check it off with, that's just technical mumbo jumbo. That doesn't really affect sales or leads or revenue in any sort of way. So I want to share this with you because it does a really good job of measuring the high opportunity cost of bounce rate. So let's say that we have a small business website here. Let's say that we take in 12,500 visitors to xyz.com during the last 12 months. And let's say that we have a bounce rate right in the midpoint there between the 50 and 60 that I mentioned. In this case, let's say it's 55%. That means that 55% of the 12,500, or in this case 6,800 of those visitors bounced, which in the sales process, that left us with 5,658 suspects. Now let's say that this site is doing a fairly good job, or this business is doing a good job of converting those suspects or unique visitors into leads. In this case, 4.77%. I will tell you that between 2 and 4% is the global standard. But so let's say that this website is overachieving in that perspective. So then that'll give us 4.77% of the 5,600 is roughly 270 leads. And then let's say that the target bounce rate of 30% leads, if we did nothing else and just drove down bounce rate, So we go from 54% or 55% down to 30%. That gives us 418 leads versus the 270. And that is an increase of 54% in lead generation. Now, you can take this deeper. In fact, I just did. I just wrote a blog post for Constant Contact, and I think they just published it yesterday, where I connected the lead generation then to revenue, where you can take your baselines for the percentage of leads that you typically convert into sales, and let's say it's 30 or 40%, times the average conversion value of each of those sales, and let's say it's $500, then that's a way that you can absolutely show increases in leads and revenue from just reducing bounce rate. And that's the only thing that we changed was bounce rate. So now let me show you some very specific ways to reduce bounce rate, as well as a tangible example of what to look for. So 3 steps. First, be distinctive with your message. And this is where it's a great tie-in to some of the things that Don is going to share, the principles of storytelling in section 2 here in just a few minutes. So you'll absolutely want to take great notes when he's going through that process. So you want to be distinctive with your message. And we use an exercise here at Predictive ROI that we call the XYZ exercise, and I'll show you how we use that in just a second. And then step 2, you want to eliminate visual clutter. For example, if you go to your home page and there are 15, 16 different items, all of those may be important to you and to your customers and so forth, but they're not all important at that exact same time. So you want to be careful with that you don't overwhelm and provide too many options, because then what happens is consumers don't make choices. In fact, the March 2013 Harvard Business Review published the results of an excellent study that showed if you have 15 or 16 different options, it creates fewer choice. But if you have 3, then customers feel more comfortable about making choice. They don't feel overwhelmed. So have fewer options. That eliminates visual clutter and makes things more clearer. And as my friend Dr. Flint McLaughlin from Marketing Experiments, he likes to say, clarity always trumps persuasion. So don't try to overwhelm. Just be very clear with a few minimal options. So that's step 2. And then step 3 is you want to make sure that you have very clear calls to action. Have 3 and be very specific about what you want your visitors to do, and they will take those actions if there's value behind them, of course. So now I'm going to break down several of these. So the lack of distinction, I'm actually enveloping in money drainer number 2 here, and some of the principles that I've learned from actually a mutual friend of Don and I. His name is Scott McCain. He's also going to be at Predictive ROI Live. He is awesome when he talks about the 4 cornerstones of distinction. And the first one, clarity, is what we're going to talk about with the XYZ exercise. Here's the exercise. It's 3 simple questions, okay? And all you need to do is sit down with your team and answer these simple questions to start creating that distinctive message. And again, this blends in really nicely with what Don is going to be sharing with us here. So we do X, where X equals the products and services, for Y, and Y being the customer profile, so they can Z, whatever the result outcome is. When you put that into a very simple statement, which could be the foundation of the story that Don's going to share, that we do X for Y so they can see, somebody can quickly read that and understand that they're in the right place. There's no confusion. It's very clear, very concise, and so forth. And I'll show you an example tangibly of that here in just a second. Then where do you place it? You want to place that XYZ message on the left side of your home page, although I'm going to show you an option here where you can put it on the right side of the home page, but you want to make sure you put it above the fold. And the reason being is because only about 5% of your audience will ever scroll below the fold. With mobile devices and iPads and phones and so forth, the fold is in much different place than when it used to be on a 27-inch monitor. So you want to make sure that you have it above the fold. So where did I learn the XYZ exercise? This is one of the things that I took out of the high performance forum that Don had mentioned. And so I can't take credit for creating this myself. I took it from Darren Hardy, who's been a great mentor of mine. So here's a tangible example. This is the home page for Predictive ROI. So if you go to predictiveroi.com, you'll see this, 7.45% bounce rate. And why is that bounce rate so low? I'm going to break down the several sections here that are allowing us to do that. And here they are. The first is, in the left-hand side, we've got a great video. a great instructional video where Darren Hardy from Success interviewed me. Here's how to fix the money drainers and how to apply the money-making opportunities. Great video. It's something to click right away. And then here's our XYZ. We do digital marketing and so forth, 200 to 500% ROI. That's the Z. We put it right there above the fold so people are going to be able to see it. Then we have credibility indicators, visual credibility indicators in the lower right, where I've been interviewed in Forbes and Washington Post, Entrepreneur, and so forth. Then we have a free bonus training, 3-part video series that people can opt in and get. It's great training. And then lastly, if you want to take it deeper on and read about either the money drainers and money makers, you can do so here. Now, to sum it all up, those are 3 in the upper left, then in the middle right, and then in the lower left, as we drag our kind of eye in a sort of a Z pattern, those are 3 very specific calls to action, and that relates to very low bounce rate. So those are some practical steps that you can use in order to reduce bounce rate in a very, very quick way. In fact, we can put these into place like the XYZ and some of the calls to action, and we can reduce bounce rate by 20% or more in just a couple days. So once you've started to do that, you started to create big momentum, right? And so this is the second to last thing that I want to cover before going back to Don. So once you fix bounce rate, your lead generation starts to go up. You start to build momentum because, as Don likes to say, you start to do those common things uncommonly well, and that really leads to success. So fixed bounce rate, lead generation goes up, big momentum starts, and it's very difficult to stop. So the last thing that I wanted to cover before going back to Don is this question. I'm asked it often by business owners and executives. Stephen, why do I have to care about this? I've got people on my staff to do this. And so I took the opportunity to ask Avinash that same thing. Avinash, why should business owners and executives care about their digital existence, their story, and how they're telling it online? And this is what he said to me. Stephen, it's because if you care about it and you understand it, then you'll be rich. But if you don't care about it and you just dump it on somebody else's lap, then you're going to be poor. And that should be incentive enough. So the business owners and executives and marketing managers who may be joining us tonight, you don't have to pull all the levers and turn all the knobs yourself. But if you're not leading and if you're not demonstrating your leadership through the process, then the possibilities are going to be missed and you're going to have missed opportunities. So now I'm going to transition back over to Don, and he's going to lead us through the storytelling piece.
Thanks, Stephen. And by the way, you know, as I said when I did the little introduction there, Stephen actually spent some time in Tallahassee with my team, and those numbers, that 76%, that's about where our website was. And I mean, I had been very proud of our website. I was really sure that everybody had to enjoy it as much as I did, right? Well, that was one of the great takeaways from that conversation, is that sometimes we're too busy building these sites for ourselves and not for other people. So when you take all of that and you start working on the digital mechanics that Steve was talking about, well, the next most important piece of your website is going to be the story that's there. And so I had shared with Stephen that tonight I was hoping to be able to talk to some of you about a little bit about how you define your story. How do you tell your story? How do you tell your story first, and then how do you tell it on your website, which again, are really kind of important here. So, Stephen, if you'll advance the slide a little bit, I talk about your story needs to be a narrative, and you need to create a narrative that is for you a distinctive way of explaining to other people why you, right? And some really consistent pieces of a great narrative, especially as it relates to the public today, is to write conversationally. Too often we're busy trying to as we put there, trying to use 25-cent words when a nickel word will do. You know, that your ability, though, to be conversational in the way you describe yourself, what you do, and why you do it, is imperative to be successful in the creation of a good narrative. It is what I will tell you has been my greatest lesson in 25 years of journalism, is learning how consistently to tell people's story in a conversational tone. In fact, as many of you know, I actually do books with a lot of other people, and have done them. My 23rd book comes out in a couple of weeks. Pretty crazy. But over the course of that time period, maybe some of the highest compliments I've been paid in was when I was engaged to do a book for somebody and had a member of their family come back later and say, you know, as I was reading it, it felt like my dad or it felt like my brother, felt like my son was telling me the story, because that's exactly the way he would have said it to me. So your ability to kind of make your narrative conversational will be really important. And then when you get ready, especially if you're building a website or if you're building a digital presence that's intended to draw people in to do business with you, you need to ask yourself key questions. And I've got several of them here that I'm going to share with you on the next slide. And the first one is, why did you choose this as a business, product, or service, right? What is it that drove you to this? What made you want to do this? I was having this similar conversation a couple of weeks ago with a group of people in the financial services industry. And, you know, one of them, while really breaking down the real reason they ultimately got into financial services, why did they get into selling to other people, which is never easy, right? But selling a financial service. And the reason was because they had experienced in their family someone who had been taken advantage of, someone who had gotten, someone who had come to a critical time in their life and they hadn't been prepared. And so this gentleman who was explaining to me his story and why he got into the business was letting me know about this interaction, this challenge with his grandmother, right? And I'm thinking, and as we went through and we really worked on the development of his narrative, it was so perfect because right there, he's no longer selling you a product. He's explaining to you that what he does is something that matters, and he does it because it matters to him. So first off, being able to explain to others why you chose what you're doing, right? Not what you're selling. You're telling them why you chose to do it. That's your first point. Secondly, is how are you different or better than your competitors, right? And that ability to explain that in concise language, because we're going to get to that in the fourth point here, but is really important. Your ability to explain and differentiate yourself, explain what you do better, and why, what it is that you do better. It's great. And then the last piece of that is, why should I care, right? Okay, I get it. You've got a good story. You're in it for the right reasons, and you have a good product. But why should I care? So in some ways, it's almost an XYZ in Stephen's little explanation of your website page. But for me, as I think of storytelling, as I think of your ability to tell your story digitally and on the web, I think you have to measure those three questions. Those are really three important ones. And then, you know, I think it's even most important that you remember that you have to have an understanding of the attention span of the average reader or viewer. You know, it's not long anymore. It gets shorter all the time. If you can't engage them and do it reasonably quick, if you can't share with them answers to those three questions reasonably quick, you should expect that people are going to move right on, because somebody else will. Somebody else can do those things. And so I bring you to those three questions and an understanding of the capacity most people have to wander through too much material. And it's ironic that I share all this with you. Here I am, a guy that writes 300-page books, right? And I'm talking to you about trying to make sure that you're concise, that you deliver a message reasonably quickly. But I do think it's important, as you understand how to tell your story in a way that some of the processes that Stephen is sharing with you can be most valuable. When people come to your page, are they engaged? And they're going to be engaged if you ask those three questions. Now, I also offered to Stephen, as we were preparing for this, some other questions. These are questions that I ask, that I work with people when I'm helping someone tell their story. Now, this is often in a bigger picture, right? It's on a book form, or maybe and these are questions that we went through today as I was working with the Wounded Warriors. You know, these are some questions that I have in my little memory bank, because each one of them has almost always elicited some really valuable story, some really valuable lesson. So I'm going to leave them with you, and this is, these pages are going to be yours to be able to share and scribble on later. But these pages were important to me. I mean, I love the question of what's your favorite failure. What failure has had the greatest impact on your success? And you'll find, you think about that, and all of us have them. All of us have had failures that were game changers. And I'm just like you. I've done it too. But in answering that question, sometimes you'll find a nugget or two, or something that really deserves to be included in your story. Is there a person with whom you have unfinished business, and why? That's a really powerful question. We all have those people, right? We all have somebody that I have unfinished business with, or that you have unfinished business with, and an understanding or thought of that, may or may not make it into your story. But think about it, because as you do, as you wrap your arms around that concept, and you start answering that question, you will find that sometimes you're in a pretty unique place when you get into the discussion. How do you define success? I've asked that question of hundreds of really extraordinary winners, really amazing people, and their answers are all over the place. And I'm okay. I'm not. I don't sit in judgment of anybody as to what their definition is. But I'm fascinated by how some people define success. How do you define success? Because you know what? Somewhere in that answer might be a piece that belongs in your story. Next page, Steve. Is there a story of someone who's overcome adversity that you enjoy? Of all the people that you've read, books you've read, stories you've read, magazine pieces, newspaper stories, maybe just someone you've engaged or encountered in your lifetime. Is there someone whose ability to overcome adversity, their story has so stuck with you that it left you, that you retell it in some ways, that you share some of what they do? Many of you have heard me share the story of Warwick Dunn and the way he managed the visit to the prison with the man that killed his mother, and that story will stick with me forever. But watching him conduct himself in the way he did, just shared lessons with me. But you know what? That it meant that much to me also says something about what I learned. There's something in there that resonates with me when I'm telling my story. I'm able to reflect on it from what I learned from Warwick. How do you answer your children when they ask, "What do you really do?" Almost anybody that has children knows that at some stage they look at you, they look at what your business card says, or what do you really do? And that's again a question that when I ask it and when I get into that conversation, especially among business leaders, it's interesting when they get into how they answer their children on that question. Pretty powerful. Do you believe there's such a thing as work-life balance? I mean, again, I'm throwing these out there as questions that I think people, when you ask these, you get into a philosophical discussion that in some way the ability for you to articulate your answer to this may play a role in the way you ultimately tell your story. So that's what these questions are intended to do. And then the last page of questions, I had 3 more here for you, or actually 2 more. What do you want to be remembered for? We all, I think, any of us, no matter where you get in your lifeline, get to a place where legacy starts to become important. What do you want that to be? What do you want that? What is that? What do you want to be remembered for? And in articulating it, well, again, you'll find that some of the things you'll say as you answer this question will become important as you tell the whole story of who you are, and as you figure out how to make that and build that into your presence. It's really valuable. And then the last one, I love this one because this is, do you have any rituals to help you get a productive day started? What is it that, when you can look at the most productive days of your life, what would they're usually the busiest, right? That's true of almost all of us. But secondly, is there any kind of ritual, is there something out there that you would say played a role in your as a ritual of a consistently productive day? Take those questions, take those 8 questions, print these sheets out, maybe scribble them out, and scribble answers. And again, as you start to break down answers to these questions, you will find an increased ability for you to be able to in unique and memorable fashion, create a story of who you are, why you do what you do, that will allow other people to be attracted to you and allow other people to want to continue to do business with you and continue to do business with you if they do already. So, it's interesting when you look at that. A lot of people think that they have to reinvent their story in order for it to be effective on the web, and that's in fact not true. I think your story is your story. Now you're not going to put War and Peace on the internet and expect people to read it, but you do need to know what are the most important pieces of what you want to share, and you need to know how you're going to go about offering those things up. So, taking those questions, these are all key building blocks of every project, every story, every person's story I've helped work on. Applying them to yourself, I hope tonight in some way that there would be of value to you. And Stephen, as we've discussed, it's important now that once you've got some of that you figure out then how to make sure that it is most properly represented there in the digital world.
Wow, that was amazing, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but we will make the replay of this session available, because I'm sure that everybody who's joining us right now is taking lots of notes, and so we'll share that replay so you can listen to it, and make sure that you can fill in the gaps and where you may have missed some of that. But holy cow, Don, that was fantastic. That was really good stuff. So as a continuation to what Don is talking about, and how do we make the transition then to be able to tell our story online, I share this quote, one of my favorites from Gary Vaynerchuk, also one of our Predictive ROI live speakers, and he, much in the same way as Don, feels that the only responsibility for every business right now is to be able to tell their story along that decision-making path. And yes, social networks and other avenues and tactics online are great ways to do that. But what I'm not going to do right now is tell you that you should be participating socially if you're not currently, and or try to convince you to do things that maybe are not part of your marketing mix. But what I am going to teach you is how to use a slice of what we call the predictive ROI method, and that's our patent pending process, so that you can use this, very, very basic, simple math to predict the financial return on investment before you ever get started. So I'm going to share that with you so that you can use the math. I'm going to give you a tangible example, and I hope you apply it, and it's going to help you eliminate all of those time-wasting mistakes. So let's press on with the formula. So there's 5 different variables, and all of this is free data that we're going to use to be able to put this into very simple algebra to be able to use, and you'll be able to calculate your return on investment before you ever get started. So let's make an assumption that we're in the financial services industry, similar to what Don had mentioned before, and let's say that we're engaged in financial planning or maybe retirement planning. And so this is the example I'm going to stitch together, that before you ever develop a content page around this story that you just crafted, what is the net effect to you in increased maybe assets under management? And I'm going to show you exactly how to put that together by going through these variables, and I'm going to break down each of these first, or each of them sequentially, so you can see how they fit into the formula. So the first piece, we're going to go to SEObook.com, and I suggest that you create a free account. You do not need a paid account, so just create a free account, and you'll be able to collect some excellent keyword data, and I'm going to show you in a second why that's relevant. So the first step is create a free account on SEObook.com. Once you've done that, you're going to use what's called the keyword suggestion tool. So here in the upper right, in this screenshot, hopefully you can read this okay through the projection, but I've typed in financial planning, and I click the green submit button, and I get a long list of terms related to financial planning. You can see that the GDE, the variable that I mentioned before, or Google Daily Estimate, which is what GDE stands for financial planning, 741 searches every single day in Google for those words financial planning. Now the downside to that, if we have any financial planners on the call here tonight, is the financial planning is very broad. And so financial planning is part of your story. It's very general. And so you want to break that down a little bit further to get at the very specific or more potentially niche service that you're offering. So we're going to go 4 lines down, and we're going to take a look at financial planning for retirement. Now, that's not really broad. It's a little bit more specific. Financial planning for retirement is not niche, but it is a bit more targeted and less competitive. So issues 64 times a day. We're going to hang on to that number. That's our GDE, and we'll be able to plug that into the formula here in just a second. So again, 64, financial planning for retirement. Next is this pie chart here, and this shows the percentage of click-throughs that you will get organically depending upon your ranking on that first page of results from Google. So to say that another way, let's say that we have the #1 ranking in Google for financial planning for retirement, and that was used 64 times a day. So this big swath of blue there, that shows us that if we're the #1 ranked site for financial planning for retirement, we're going to get 42% of the 64 searches a day are going to access our website because of our story versus a different competitor, maybe 2, 3, and 4. So that #1 ranked position is 42%. And if we go all the way down over on the left-hand side, we see that little slice of purple, that 2.99%, that represents the #10 ranked site. So, you know, the rumors that you've heard, if you're not on page 2 or 3, you know, nobody's going to find you. The reality is, if you're not on page 1 and high up on page 1, nobody's going to see you. So the #1 ranked site gets 42% of the clicks. The #10 ranked site gets 2.99. It drops off precipitously. So now we take our conversion rate of leads and unique visitors. So we take the number of leads, in this example 14,000, and we divide it by unique visitors, almost 680,000, and that gives us a conversion rate. If you recall back to the earlier example about bounce rate, which that was 4, almost 5%, the global standard is between 2 and 4%. This is the math that you can use to figure out what your baseline is if you don't currently know. So you want to calculate that, and it's very simple division. Next, let's stitch it together. So let's say that we're going to develop a content page on our website, whether it's a blog post or an article or a services page, whatever, that's going to tell that story about why we're engaged in financial planning for retirement. But before you do that, you want to be able to figure out, is this story going to help me make money? Am I going to get a return on investment on crafting that story? And this is how you calculate it. So 64 daily searches times 0.42%, the click-through rate, that's going to give us about 27 visits a day. Those 27 visits, if we have a 3% conversion into financial planning leads, that gives us 0.8 leads a day. Now, obviously, you can't have 0.8 leads a day, so we take that across 30 days, and it roughly gives us about 24, maybe 25 appointments per month. If you're a financial planner, you've been doing this for a while, you have a baseline for the number of appointments and then what percentage of those appointments convert into new clients. Let's say it's 30% closure rate, and let's say that your new clients have an average conversion value of $250,000. And so you modify those baselines based on your existing performance. So if you had a #1 ranking in Google for financial planning for retirement, and that synced up with the story that Don just helped us craft, then that leads to $1.8 million in new assets under management every single month. So you take the storytelling steps in crafting that Don just shared with us. We put that into practice, and then you can collect some free data to test the potential ROI and predict your ROI with a level of certainty before you ever fully start building out your website around that story. So this is a good way for you to be able to predict your return on investment before you ever get started. And so I would highly suggest that you take this formula, start to use it, because it will save you a bunch of time. So before we get to the Q&A, and I should mention too, this would be a great time to start sending in your questions using the lower right question box, or it might look like a chat box. Send us your questions, and we'll be sure to answer those here in about 2 or 3 minutes. So there's just one more thing that I wanted to share with you before we get to the Q&A. So just a few more details about the Predictive ROI Live that Don mentioned earlier. So, you know, why did we do this? And a little bit of this is what our story is. So we set out to create, you know, what we could feel was a robust and intense learning experience, specifically for business owners and entrepreneurs who are looking to bypass all those contradictions and cut through all the digital marketing confusion, because there's a ton of it that's out there. And then those people who really wanted to achieve phenomenal growth over the next 12 months. So because of that, we not only designed an event, like Don said, for 2.5 days, but this is actually a 12-month ongoing mentoring and training program for you and your team. So we're going to do monthly exclusive web workshop sessions with all of our experts that you and your team will be able to dial into. So you're going to get the latest business leadership and digital marketing insights that we collect on an ongoing basis. So Predictive ROI Live, though, I mean, this is an unprecedented opportunity for you and 149 other peers, business owners, ambitious business owners, to meet one another and learn directly from these experts who have never shared the same stage before. And like it says here on this slide, this is actually Don's first ever publicly ticketed event. Normally, he's just up until this point, been booked for private events, corporate events, and so forth. So this is the first time that anybody has been able to purchase a ticket and come to hear him speak. So the cost to attend is $29.95 for general admission. It's $39.95 for VIP. That's all inclusive except your travel costs. So your stay at the Ritz and the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando, all of your meals and all of the receptions and so forth, all of that is included in your ticket price. But I do want to mention our gift to you. So, the people who are attending today and who have registered, so we're going to select one guest out of the first 10 tickets that are purchased from today's workshop attendees. And we're going to choose that one person out of the first 10, and that person is going to receive his or her ticket for free. So we'll immediately refund the price back to them, so their ticket is free. Or if they prefer, we're going to give them an additional ticket, complimentary, so a member of their team can also attend live. So that's our gift to you. And I also want to mention, too, that, again, about the 12 months. So every single month, web workshops and Q&A sessions with me and each of our live experts, so that it's not a singular event, that this is a 12-month training program. And I think lastly, the VIP bonus. So each of the VIP guests, there is the VIP lunch Q&A on Friday, but on Saturday, immediately following Don's closing speech, closing keynote, we will have a VIP farewell with our experts immediately following. And that's just going to be some real awesome time spent. So that's a little bit more about live. We will send you an email immediately following the workshop with some additional details and links and so forth, but I want to make sure that we cover that before the Q&A piece. Okay, so let me take a look quick at our questions. And let's see, question from James: how do we copy of the slide deck used today? James, you'll have that in the replay. So the replay will come with the audio and the slides all blended together as one file, so you'll have those. We won't be sending out a separate slide deck, but you'll have all of the questions and so forth that Don had, and be able to work through that, as well as all the math and so forth. So question from Scott, and it looks like this one's going to be for Don, or let me just read through it real quick. Thanks for the awesome information. Oh, you're welcome, Scott. Should a story be told in first person or third person, and where should the story be placed on the website? So that first piece, Don, should the story be in first person or third person? What do you think?
I think there are reasons or ways to do both of them. On our website, for example, on my speaking website, really much of it is kind of done in third person. Interestingly, we choose to do that. There's in part it's because it makes me comfortable, right? It makes me more comfortable to have it written in third person. But secondly, it's because a lot of it is also generated so that if somebody were to print it out to say make an introduction or to do to use it for some reason, they would, it's written in a third-person way in which they could read it straight off the sheet, straight off the web page. So I think there's actually reasons or places where you want to do a little of both, but but I think if I'm getting into the story of why did I start sharing the stories that I do from a stage, I would do that first person. If I'm telling a story of who I am or what I've done in my career, I would do that in third person. I hope that makes sense, Stephen. But to me, I think there's actually reasons or places in which both models work really effectively.
And the second part of that question, and Don, maybe you'll have something to add to this as well. But so Scott says, where should a story be placed on the website? And my first thought with that is several different places. My first suggestion would be to absolutely include that on your site's homepage, and for a couple of reasons. One is because your homepage really should act as essentially the orientation to you, your brand, your story, and really give them that foundation as to why they're there. So that's just kind of a natural place to place it. And you want to place it, again, above the fold so you can make sure that people see that as one of the first things, because people scan online just like we do in newsprint or magazines or so forth, from top to bottom, left to right. So you want to make sure that you have that above the fold. And then once you have this story crafted, I would suggest that you also take and try to create visual or maybe audio-visual representations of that story through either video interviews that you've seen Don and I do, or that you've seen maybe potentially Gary Vaynerchuk or Avinash Kaushik and I do. So you take elements of your story, you capture it through video or through blog posts or through social media distributions, and so you take that and you're able to distribute it and across all of these different channels in a very creative and clear way. So that's where I would suggest that you place it on your website and how to share it. But Don, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think that's you would know that part of it. I think when it comes to storytelling, it's the only place I have much to offer here.
Okay. So the next question we have is from Mark. It says, where do Stephen and Don go to stay current with the constantly changing SEO requirements? Oh, okay. Great question.
I'll answer. Let me answer that question. I go to Stephen.
Okay.
So I go to Stephen. So Stephen, you tell him where you go, and then we're both in the same place.
That's awesome. Well, so thanks for that. So this is what we do. It's a relatively informal process, but we have a casual sort of data collection that most business owners or digital marketing specialists probably do. We read blogs and we keep up on Google updates, and anytime there's a big algorithm change like Hummingbird recently and so forth, and so we pay attention to kind of that mainstream stuff. But a lot of that, you have to kind of run through a filter, because sometimes, quite frankly, it's a bit of crap, and so you want to certainly understand what is going out there. So if clients were to ask you about it, you can answer those questions intelligently. But then, quite frankly, what we do is we test it. And we really put those concepts or new kind of quote-unquote theories to practice. And so we have several kind of sandbox sites, if you will, several experimental sites that we use where we're creating, blog posts. And this is good content. It's not like it's, sites where we're trying to, black hat stuff or try to fake out Google. But we're creating content on, different industries and different sites, and we're testing things. And we learn a lot in those experimental sites. And I think we have about 3 of them. And we use our own site as an experimental site as well. So that's where we really kind of test it. We conduct our own ongoing research. So Mark, hopefully that was helpful to you. Okay, so next question. This is a thank you from Jason. Your session's greatly appreciated. Excellent shares, gentlemen, so that was very kind. Thank you very much, Jason. Next is from Ed. Thanks, guys. I'm 21 and so interested in learning all these great techniques. How can I stand out from other people in my field when first launching my site? Let's see. So, Don, do you want to take that?
Well, I think, I think again, this is me believing that at the end of the day, that all of the magic is important, but content is key. So how do you stand out? You stand out by being more by actually telling a really good story. I mean, being able hopefully to explain the answers to some of those questions in a way that makes other people say, that's somebody I want to learn more about, right? At the end of the day, that's how you define. Stephen calls it bounce rate. I say that if people keep moving on through your site, it's because they want to see that you've stood out enough. They want to know more about you, and that's truly a reflection of content. So if you're 21 and you're working on the content of your life and the content of your story, focus on thinking through some of those things about what it is that makes you unique and drives you to do what you're hoping to achieve. What are the drivers in your life? And if you're on this call, that means you obviously have a driver or two. That's pretty good.
Indeed. So, Don, the next question comes from Jim, and he says, hi, Stephen and Don. Thanks for the seminar. And then question for you, Don. Don, curious what would be initial questions that you suggest asking on a podcast to get a guest comfortable, and what would be some examples of key questions that provide answers that listeners, readers in your world, find insightful?
Well, often the comfort question that you're asking there, which all of us do if you're in the interviewing business, you have to get people warm. You don't start off by asking them the question you really want the answer to. You often ask them other questions to get them comfortable. And understand first and foremost, the comfort question is not generally going to be your most insightful question, but it's going to be a question that allows people. You want to think of a question that gives them the greatest amount of rope to wander off and talk about themselves with. So if you know just enough about that person, if you've done some research and you know enough about them, you want to ask them a question that gives them 90 seconds of conversation about themselves, because at that stage they start feeling comfortable, right? They're feeling more comfortable. So I don't know if there's a single question that I've ever thought of that makes that, because often the question is going to come down to what you are able to learn about them, right? What is their passion? And I always ask people early about something that I've identified as their passion. The second you get them talking about their passion, about themselves, it's not long before they start feeling comfortable going with you and the places you really want to go with the conversation.
Awesome. Well, this next question might be a really great continuation to what Jim asked you, and this is from Jason. So when crafting, creating, or sharing your story, is there a line where passion or depth can go too far for a client?
Is there a place where your passion can go too deep for a client?
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
Yeah, where passion or depth can go too deep for a client.
I would say that if it's something you're really passionate about and that passion is off-putting to them, they probably shouldn't be your client. Because the truth is, at the end of the day, you're going to have conflict there between maybe if you're more passionate about something than they are, then the relationship might not work out, right? I look at client relationships like dating or marriage. You ultimately you're going to be in hopefully this relationship for some time, and in that sense, you need to make sure there's a high level of compatibility. And too often we get stuck trying to become that everyone's our client. And at the end of the day, that's not a good strategy. Not everyone should be your client.
Indeed, good point. We've got time for maybe a couple of more questions. Jim just sent you a thank you for your answer about the comfort question and so forth. So if there's a couple of more questions, this would be the time to ask. Let's see. Stephen, could you clarify the 1 out of 10 gift you mentioned earlier? Is it only open to the next 10 people who buy a seat? Yes. So we're expecting that, we're hoping that there's going to be some people from tonight's workshop and so forth, and other people that Don and I know who are going to want to join us in Orlando. And so out of that group, the first 10 who purchase a seat and register, whether that's general admission or if it's VIP, it doesn't matter. As long as the first 10 who register, those first 10, we will take somebody out of that group, out of that first 10, and that's where we give the gift to that person, and we'll either make their ticket 100% free, complimentary to that person so they can attend live for free, or if that person says, you know what, I would really like to bring maybe my marketing manager or my vice president of marketing or, somebody on my team in a different position because they really need to hear this story and this message and this curriculum, then we'll give them a complimentary ticket. So essentially they got 2 tickets for the price of 1. So that's essentially how it works. But yes, it is out of the first 10 that are sold, immediately following this session. So next question from Wendy. What importance do you and Don place on win-win relationships and giving to prospective clients? Can you explain? Good question.
Go ahead, Stephen.
So, well, this is really interesting because win-win relationships is actually one of our core values. So our core values at Predictive, core value number 1 is value everyone. Core value number 2 is to always create win-win relationships with anybody. So whether that's a client, prospective vendor, whatever those relationships might be. So here at Predictive, we place a huge amount of importance on it, and in teaching and so forth. So I mean, it's absolutely one of our core values. So I don't know, Don, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I would tell you, as I think maybe some of our guests know, I'm in the process of working on a book with a man who made win-win quite famous. His family engaged me to write the biography of Stephen Covey, and so as a guy who I had the chance to get to meet Dr. Covey and get the chance to work with his family and learn about the genesis of that mindset for him. It's an absolute. I think I'm always looking for those relationships, and if only one of us wins, it's not generally ever going to be anything I'm really going to enjoy.
Thanks, Wendy. Great question. Well, it looks like we're right at our time, and just wanting to respect everybody's schedules for joining us. So thanks, everybody, for taking time. And Don and I look forward to being with you at Predictive ROI Live, and we will send an email shortly with some additional details about the live event. We will have the live replay of tonight's web workshop. We'll be able to share that soon, within the next day or so you'll have that. But thank you again for your time this evening. We enjoyed the questions, and we appreciate the thoughtful questions that you sent to us and your time with us this evening. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.